Tonight, face-to-face with Conrad Black. Frank revelations in a CTV News exclusive. The former media mogul grants a rare TV interview.
It is a misfortune to me that a great many people think that I'm guilty of something. But I did make some mistakes.
With a hint of remorse as he heads back to jail. Harsh lessons from a night of chaos.
Alcohol played a big part in this.
Crowds unchecked. Police overwhelmed. Did poor planning invite the Stanley Cup riot?
They were actually in a completely different place and very much disadvantaged.
And signing off with gratitude. It's time to say goodbye.
CTV National News with Lloyd Robertson.
Good evening. One last time for CTV National News. And we begin with a story you'll only see here. It's a revealing conversation with Conrad Black as the former media baron prepares to return to a U.S. federal prison. And it is Black's first sit-down television interview since his legal nightmare began. With his characteristic bombast, Black is surprisingly open about his life behind bars. Our Lisa LaFlamme joins me now, and Lisa has some exclusive details about what happens to him next.
Lloyd, I sat with Conrad Black for a 3-hour interview in New York, and to call it compelling really is an understatement. We covered a lot of territory, but the latest development in this ongoing saga, Conrad Black is not going back to Florida's Coleman Federal State Prison. It seems 2 female prison guards who testified against him are now afraid for their safety.
They had a security fear if I went back there, as if I was going to assault these 2 women who are not pin-up girls, believe me. You know, I mean, to go back there for 7 months, for the first time in my life at the age of 67, I'm going to commit assault on these 2.
So what's your reaction to that? I mean, at the very least, you became comfortable in that environment. Now you have to do it all over again.
My reaction is that no inanity, stupidity, or malicious inconvenience inflicted by the Bureau of Prisons surprises me.
To the average Joe, you've been in prison and you're going back to prison.
Yes.
So you've been convicted of something.
I am not responsible for what the average Joe thinks about it. And I don't say that disparagingly of the average Joe. Why should he know any more about it than he does? And it is a misfortune to me that a great many people think that I'm guilty of something. But I did make some mistakes, and I think even my most vocal critics will acknowledge I paid for them.
For 29 months inside Coleman Federal Prison, Black tutored fellow inmates, but those cellmates taught him something also.
Most of the time I had a very nice Honduran. He didn't speak English very well, very nice person though. And the last person on the lower bunk was, again, a very pleasant guy from North Carolina.
What was he in for?
You never ask.
Really? Aren't you curious?
If they want to mention it, they'll mention it. And some people did, but if they don't, then you don't ask.
I did ask about the toll this ordeal had taken on his wife, Barbara Emile. For the first time, he admitted guilt.
Do you feel guilty about the impact these years have had on her?
I don't normally confess to a television camera with a large number of viewers. So I will make an exception on this one occasion for this. I would not normally consider CTV to be an appropriate place for confession, but the answer is yes, and I have made my confession to her on that point many times.
We can't tell you which prison Conrad Black is going to, but I can say that it is closer to Toronto, which will be less taxing on his wife, Barbara, who visited him in that Florida prison sometimes twice a week. So, Lloyd, we will have a lot more revealing information on Monday night about Lord Black's next move.
So did we see Conrad Black with a hint of remorse this time? A little contrition, Lisa?
Well, we certainly heard him admit to some mistakes, which is rare. You just heard that. But when it comes to to those convictions. He is fiery. He is adamant. He committed no crimes. He calls this torture, what he's lived through. You know, he actually wrote a book in prison. It's called A Matter of Principle, and it comes out this month in September. And it really is his side of the story, and as I say, truly a compelling story. He admits that he could have played his cards more diplomatically and says he will when he returns. So we'll talk more about that on Monday.
All of that sounds fascinating. Well, we'll see you soon, Lisa.
Lloyd, I just want to say, I have to say, I will miss these talkbacks with you, and I will miss you.
Thank you. Good night. The long-awaited report on the Vancouver riots is out, and it confirms what everyone who saw the shocking footage already knows. Police were totally overwhelmed and woefully unprepared. The report outlines a litany of problems leading up to the violent rampage and makes recommendations to prevent it from happening again. CTV's Lisa LaFlamme has the details.
This is what happens when too many drunk people are allowed to run free with no consequences. That's the gist of a government-commissioned report that's taken 2 months to produce.
The riot was caused by thugs and villains and people who cheered them on.
The authors say what fueled the Stanley Cup riot in Vancouver June 15th was too many people arriving sooner than the police did, and they were intoxicated. The report says there were 446 officers facing 155,000 people. However, once the night was over, 928 officers were on the street.
There were not too few police, there were too many people. Not too many people for the police, but too many people for the venue.
Keefe and Furlong insist more officers would not have prevented what happened. However, the report says many mistakes were made. The city and the Vancouver Police Department should have considered a worst-case scenario. The police chief's strategy to be visible and greet fans became impossible because the crowd was crushing and police couldn't move. And police were too late getting on the ground for the 5 o'clock game.
The fans arrived long before most of the police. The opportunity to set the tone was lost.
When the crowds turned ugly, police didn't react quickly enough. Getting officers into tactical gear took too long, and there was command confusion on the street because of a faulty radio.
They should have had one of the helicopters in the air. They should have had the police who were early deployed calling back in and saying, we've got to rev up our deployment.
If I knew there was going to be a riot, I would have deployed way more police officers.
In a strange twist, the region's transportation system was too efficient that night, moving thousands of people into the riot zone. The report says if Vancouver wants to host a large event again, there has to be a better regional plan. Lisa Rossington, CTV News, Vancouver.
There is a lot of soul-searching in the hockey world tonight following the sudden death of Wade Belak. The body of the former NHL tough guy was found in a Toronto hotel room yesterday. Numerous reports say he took his own life. It's not clear if his 14-year career as an enforcer on the ice played a role, but in the wake of 2 other hockey deaths, some say it's part of a disturbing trend. CTV's John Benavalli-Rao has more.
This is the last known photo taken of Wade Belak on the right, smiling and posing with a fan at a Toronto bar, about 12 hours before his body was discovered in this downtown hotel, with reports suggesting the NHLer somehow killed himself.
You're just floored. You just, it just hits you like a punch in the stomach.
Today, those who knew Belak on the ice said his sudden death just doesn't add up.
He didn't seem like a guy that had a lot of demons. And everywhere he played with the media, he had fun.
Belak had recently retired from the game and was in Toronto filming a skating-based reality TV show. By most accounts, he seemed happy, even to his dad, reached by phone in British Columbia.
Yeah, we had no indication at all that there was anything like this to be worried about.
Belak was 35 and leaves behind 2 young children and a wife. In a statement, she said, Wade was a big man with an even bigger heart. He was a deeply devoted father and husband, a loyal friend, and a well-respected athlete. This loss leaves a huge hole in our lives. And a community of hockey players in disbelief there's another death.
This is the 3rd guy already this summer. I mean, it's hard to grasp.
Just last month, Winnipeg forward Rick Rippon was found dead in his Alberta home. He'd suffered from depression. And in May, New York forward Derek Bugard died of a drug overdose. All 3 were enforcers, meaning they did a lot of fighting, prompting questions about the toll that can take on a player. though some say it's not yet clear Bilak's death had anything to do with hockey.
We don't have the facts yet. We don't know all of the information.
Meanwhile, Bilak's dad says his family is surprised things went this way and that he's still not sure himself whether his son's death had anything to do with the game he loved. John Vedavelli-Rao, CTV News, Toronto.
It has been almost a week since Hurricane Irene slammed into the eastern United States, and still the after effects linger on. An estimated 1 million homes and businesses in 5 states are still without power. New York is in the worst shape. Hydro crews have been brought in from other parts of the country to do repairs. Officials say it could be another week or more until the lights are back on everywhere. And far out over the Atlantic, another big storm is swirling towards land. Katia has been downgraded from hurricane to tropical storm status, but forecasters say you can bet money it's going to change. Katia is expected to gain strength over the next 2 days and could be a major hurricane when it reaches the Caribbean. It is still about 1,500 kilometers from land, but moving steadily westward. Experts say it's still too soon to tell if it will hit the U.S. coast. Coming up after the break, Canada takes new steps to help rebuild Libya, and later, taking it on the road, some of the toughest new driving laws in the entire country. As the search for Muammar Gaddafi continues, there is still another major challenge for the new leaders of Libya. How to deal with the ousted dictator's supporters. Many of them took up arms, and with the rebels now largely in control, tension is on the rise, and deep and dangerous divisions are everywhere. CTV's Janice Maker-Frere reports from Tripoli.
Out of loyalty or financial need, they all fought for Muammar Gaddafi. Now they're prisoners under watch. We are brothers. The most important thing is for the killing to stop, says this Gaddafi soldier. Yet when rebel guards are out of sight, the voices here shift. I ask this man if he still believes in Gaddafi. Beyond the only closed door is a woman, an accused sniper named Nasreen, who says she was raped by Gaddafi men and forced to execute rebel fighters.
She's been brought here, nothing wrong with her, the whole lot, everything. She knows more than anything else that she's never going to see the light of day again.
She's not going to see the light of day? In an interview with CTV, the head of Tripoli's military council insisted that the war is against a dictator, not each other. But in these fragile days of a new Libya, those not aligned with the rebels fear vengeance. Human rights groups say rebels are targeting sub-Saharan Africans on suspicion they are hired mercenaries. Many are migrant workers, and more than 1,000 are hiding at an abandoned port with no money, no passports, and no one to help.
Which freedom fighter will take you and search you, take your money, take your phones, take what you have you left here after they have taken what you have in town?
A week after Gaddafi vanished, the de facto leadership here is also invisible. Neighborhoods govern themselves. Streets are overrun with rebel factions all claiming to be in charge.
In a series of audio messages, Muammar Gaddafi has promised a long war here. He still has supporters, though it's unclear whether they'll rise up as the embattled leader hopes, or like him, simply hide. Lloyd?
Thank you, Janice. Janice Maker-Frere in Tripoli. Helping Libya rebuild after decades of oppression was the sole item on the agenda at a meeting of world leaders in Paris, including Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Job one, releasing billions of frozen Libyan assets. CTV's Richard Madden is traveling with the Prime Minister tonight.
After thanking the troops who played a big role in the Libya mission, the Prime Minister then flew to Paris and joined other world leaders to plan for Libya's future. But what Canada's enhanced role may be is unclear.
We haven't yet decided what specific areas we'll help in, but I can assure you that Canada will remain for the transition for humanitarian assistance, and we will make a substantial contribution going forward.
Harper lifted sanctions that now lets most Canadian businesses resume in Libya, but all countries are still bound by the UN's international freeze of Libya's assets worth hundreds of billions. Libya's new government insists that cash is needed to rebuild.
We need the international community to support us with lifting sanctions.
Some UN countries are skeptical of Libya's new government and refuse to recognize them. But other countries are calling on the UN to release the cash.
Today's meeting validated the confidence that all the other nations around the table had placed in the TNC.
Harper even hinted UN bureaucracy is getting in the way.
The National Transitional Council is the legitimate government of the people of Libya and should have access to monies that belong to the Libyan people.
Late tonight, Harper met with Libya's new government, saying Canada will stick with the mission until the job is done. Back at home, though, critics say Parliament must approve any new mission.
There should be a focus on civilian and diplomatic initiative.
World leaders say the Arab Spring cannot give way to a winter of oppression. But rebuilding Libya could get messy and take years. That's why more than 60 nations have pledged their support. Richard Madden, CTV News, Paris.
In business news, markets in New York and Toronto dipped into negative territory today over ongoing concerns about the fragile global recovery. Here's a quick glance at some of those closing numbers. We are back shortly, but first, what's coming up in local news? Starting today, motorists in Alberta have to live by a whole new set of rules. Talking on cell phones, programming the GPS, putting on makeup. The province was the last to introduce laws against distracted driving, but in Alberta, they have revved it up a couple of notches. CTV's Janet Dirks has more.
Busted. This Calgary man, one of the first to get a ticket under Alberta's new distracted driving legislation.
I was actually talking to work. I'm like, oh.
That earned him a fine of $172.
Expensive.
This woman also got a ticket because she was texting while stopped at a red light.
Any questions at all?
She's not pleased.
I'm not going to be using my cell phone while I'm on the road anymore.
Under the new rules, there are several driving don'ts, as this woman learned.
No more talking, texting, looking at anything to do with your cell phone.
Drivers are also forbidden from reading, operating a GPS, putting on makeup, even eating. But it's up to police to decide whether to issue a ticket.
Sipping a cup of coffee is taking one hand off the wheel. Your eyes are still up on the roadway. Not a huge concern for me.
The most common excuse in these early hours from Alberta drivers is they didn't know today was the day, even though the legislation was introduced more than a year ago.
The driver of this blue pickup admitted he knew the law.
On my stupid phone. You were.
He got a warning.
I'm happy. I'm $172 richer.
It's not so funny to Amanda Stokes, on painkillers ever since a driver rear-ended her car. He was on a cell phone.
There's people on the receiving ends. If people would just stop and realize the potential impact that they're having on other people's lives.
The Alberta government promises the public will be protected by the new rules, and those who don't keep their eyes on the road will be punished. Janet Dirks, CTV News, Calgary.
One of the biggest names in women's tennis has been sidelined at the U.S. Open tournament in New York, but not by an opponent. Venus Williams announced that she has been diagnosed with Sjogren's syndrome, a rare and chronic autoimmune disease. Major symptoms include dry eyes, dry mouth, and joint pain. He is an 11-year-old hockey player who made the shot but got the shaft. This was the contest in Minnesota a couple of weeks ago. Nate Smith, remember his name, wound up and snapped the puck half the length of the ice into a tiny slot in the net. Good for $50,000. But the company promoting the contest disqualified him because his twin brother, Nick, was supposed to be out there on the ice. The consolation prize, $20,000, will be donated to youth hockey in the boy's name. And when we return, a final word.
Well, Lloyd, this truly is the end of an era. You've been delivering the news since I was barely more than a boy. You've been doing it for so long and so authoritatively. You've almost become part of Canada's geography. And I know that Canadians from coast to coast are going to miss you. On our part, Lorene and I want to wish you and Nancy all the best as you chart a new course in life.
On behalf of the NDP and all Canadians, have a great retirement with friends and family. Thanks again.
When Canadians think of Lloyd Robertson, they think of one word, and only one word: integrity. His word is everything. He is authenticity. He is authority. He's a good-humored guy. He's a great Canadian. He's a great broadcaster. And dare I say it, he's a good friend.
And so we come to the end. And it couldn't happen at a more fitting time than the beginning of September 2011. It was 35 years ago this month that I agreed to come to work for CTV, and Harvey Kirk and I teamed up for a successful 7.5-year run. During that period and since, we have had the usual ups and downs in the news cycle, from natural disasters to royal weddings. And I am deeply grateful to the many of you who have stayed with us through it all. For me, it's been a rare privilege to have been able to serve in this position for so long. It's been a front row seat to history. If someone had told me 60 years ago this would be my life, I would have said they were crazy. Most of all, it's been fascinating to watch our country grow in confidence and stature. We have developed a unique place in the world. We can brag, in that modest Canadian way, of course, about our AAA credit rating, about the success of the Vancouver Olympics, and look forward with some assurance that we won't have to undergo the near-death experience of another Quebec referendum. Thank you 1,000 times over for all of your touching messages, some that speak of watching through the generations. There is the woman from Ontario who tells me that as a student, our familiar opening music would take her from studying at 11 o'clock to join with her parents for the newscast and discuss the events of the day. She now does the same with her own children. Without her and people like her, I would not have been around for so very long. And it's not false modesty to say that I am only the most visible member of a highly skilled and thoroughly production and technical professionals all around me here and out beyond. I can simply never offer them praise enough. The CTV National News with Lisa LaFlamme begins on Monday. I will see you along the way. And that's the kind of day it's been, this Thursday, September the 1st, for all of us at CTV News. Good night.
Thanks for the memory. Oh, thanks for the memory.
CTV News, Canada's #1 newscast.